Welcome back to MythCraft, an epic role-playing saga. This is the next video in our ongoing tutorial series about playing MythCraft. This video is going to focus on magic, the 5 sources of magic, the different types of magic, how to utilize magic in your game as a player of MythCraft. I'm joined as always by Cody and also by Mal. So Cody, can you introduce yourself again real quick?
Yeah, sure. I play all kinds of cool characters. I play Carl. I mean, you know him. He's good old guy. Spurs Pirate Grundle. You know, Grundle. You know, you can't beat that guy. And look forward to Old Man Hollow on MythCraft the podcast, my newest character.
Yeah, awesome. And Mal.
Hi, I'm Mal. New to Homebrew Network, new to MythCraft, and you can look forward to hearing me as Thistle Featherfoot in MythCraft the podcast.
Wonderful. And I am Nathan. I'm the lead game designer for MythCraft. I'm the game master of Sanity Damage, the live show on the Homebrew Network. I played a couple PCs in Power Word Fail from the Homebrew Network, and in the upcoming podcast, MythCraft the Podcast, you can meet my newest character, Hildegard. Introductions out of the way, we're going to dive into magic today. MythCraft is unique in that it has 5 different sources of magic that interact with one another in kind of a rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock dynamic. Each one is stronger than 2, each one is weaker than 2. We'll get into that in a little bit. For now, I'm going to talk through kind of the lore of magic in MythCraft. Here you can see a fun graphic that Jake did. He's just awesome at these illustrations. These are the 5 sources of magic. So we're going to start with the actually, before we even get to the arcane source, I'm going to back up and talk about the 2 key components of magic, which are the fundamental wellspring and essence. The fundamental wellspring is just a fact of existence in this reality. It is the like force that surrounds and binds us, that penetrates us, whatever. Insert Star Wars reference. The fundamental wellspring is like a at I'm trying to define it without saying arcane because that's another source, but it's just magic. It's hard to define the same way that wind is hard to define. It's easy to point out when you see its effects. You see the wind rustle through the leaves, you're like, that's wind. You see the apple fall from the tree, you say, that's gravity. Like it's one of those things that for non-scientific folk such as myself, I have a hard time putting it into words, but I can point it out and I know it when I see it. Magic scholars in Ansera could talk circles around me with that definition. Fictional scholars that we haven't met yet. Phineas, the MythCraft legend, he could explain exactly what the fundamental wellspring is. But think about it as magic gravity. The world works, the physics work with it, and without it, we just don't know what reality might be like. Essence, if you're a longtime listener to the Homebrew podcast or the Homebrew Network, you definitely understand Essence. As he's a longer term player in the Homebrew Network, I'm going to pass it off to Cody to do kind of an explanation of that.
Sure. I mean, I've been trying to decode Essence since I've been doing podcasts. Essence is like it's similar to the wellspring. It's like a necessity for life. Everyone has it. If you are alive, if you are even like an AI or an intelligence of some kind, animals. Um, but it's not it's not something that you, how do I put this? I'm also not the best, but it's not something that you just have. It's more something that you generate. It's an equation: time plus change equals essence. So, you're born you do have essence, but that was because you were granted it from the change that overcame your parents. And as you grow, you generate essence, and as you make decisions and live your life, you would have more essence. And the more you can, obviously, if you're a spellcaster, they're looking to amplify their essence. But it is also a force that binds everybody, and there's a lot of mysteries about it that I don't fully understand. But it's basically like a like a life essence. I hate to use essence in the definition of the word
Right.
essence.
Define the word with the word.
Yeah, but it's like the derivative of life. I don't know how else to put it. Like the boiled down essential oils.
A ghost is just essence that you've put in a diffuser.
I mean, kind of. I mean, a ghost is just like a manifestation of essence. It's everywhere. It's everything that's related to life, as I understand it.
Yeah, and another really interesting point about essence is it works a little bit differently, and it manifests a little bit differently across different existences. So
Yes.
while that definition is like broadly true across most existences, if you've watched World Weavers, for example, it's a physical manifestation. It's like a gym in that reality.
Mm.
But yeah, in general, it's like this metaphysical derivative of life. I think is a really good way to say
It's
it.
also a gem in Power Word Fail.
I never put that together. It may have been stated and it just went in one ear and out the other.
No, it never got stated, but I mean that's what was going on.
Excellent. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. All right, so with those two thoughts in mind, with essence and with the fundamental wellspring, let's talk about the 5 sources. The arcane source is just accessing the fundamental wellspring directly through study, through practice. You reach out, you grab this fundamental wellspring of magic, and you channel it into arcane abilities. You cast a fireball, you alter gravity, you pull someone to you, you create like a warding shield, all different manner of things. The arcane source is the most widely applicable. It has the largest repertoire of spells and spell-like effects that you can do with it. It is also the most risky because you're tapping into that source directly. You risk burning yourself. For people who have read the Wheel of Time, it's kind of like that system where like you reach out and it has like the potential to suck you in, to burn you out, to cause all kinds of like negative effects as well. So that's the arcane source. The divine source is much safer for the caster. What's actually happening with the divine source is a caster, like a cleric or a zealot, they might pray to a god or commune with a god or enter into a bargain with a god, like a D&D warlock. You might consider using the divine source. You might originally think, wait, what about a cult? We'll come back to a cult in a minute. The pact that you see in like a warlock build is more divine than it is a cult most of the time. But what's actually happening there is the gods themselves use the arcane source. And because they're gods and because they're like extremely powerful, they're immortal, they're able to access arcane magic a lot more reliably and a lot more safely and at a much more vast scale. Mortals or humanoids or whatever that pray to these gods or bargain with these gods can gain slivers of this power through the filter of it being used by a god before it's used by a mortal. So they protect you from like that intense backlash that you run the risk of from going directly to the arcane. And this changes the exact nature of the magic. Like it's a lot more healing, a lot more radiant. There's some resurrection stuff in there too, which is difficult because of how essence works. Resurrection is not guaranteed by any means, because your essence, like once you die, your essence begins just kind of floating away, right? So resurrection is temporary isn't the right word. There's a temporary window where resurrection works, is what I'm trying to say. Before your essence is just too. There's terms and conditions. Yeah, it's a limited warranty.
Depending on your god, they probably ate your essence.
Yeah.
Right.
Make sure you read the fine print.
Rest in peace. Insert spoiler here. Yeah. So the other source that is kind of a derivative of the arcane source is the primal source of magic. The primal source of magic is kind of the evolution of the arcane magic that has played out in kind of a self-contained bubble. So there's all of these different planes of existence in MythCraft. You've got Istari, which is like where the Celestials hang out. You've got Inferno, which is where the Fiends and Exiles hang out. And you've got the Everwilds, which is just this massive like plane where magic has run rampant and caused trees and mountains to grow to enormous scale. There's lava flows, there's glaciers. Sometimes there's lava flows that cut through glaciers, like wild natural phenomena. Like maybe I think that does exist in real life in like Iceland, but it's not very common. And there's just all these crazy things that can happen in the Everwilds. Part of why that happened is because arcane magic got trapped in this demiplane, or this plane of existence, and over the course of eons, this magic evolved the way an animal might, or the way a species might, until it no longer resembles exactly the same thing that it originally was. So primal magic is less powerful, a little bit more focused. It's specifically dealing with nature instead of just anything goes with arcane. But again, as with divine, it's also more safe because it's not just this raw, like you're not touching a raw flame. You're touching a lantern that has the flame within it, right? It's you can achieve some of the same effects with primal magic, but it's not as powerful, nor is it as dangerous. Psionic magic, I think, is the one we'll deal with next, and that is the manipulation of one's essence, and perhaps the manipulation of other people's essence. So by knowing how to use your own essence, whether that's through, kind of like with arcane, that might be through intellectual study. It might just be through kind of intuiting and feeling it out, more like a Jedi might, I guess. I guess depending on the era of Star Wars, right? Some Jedi mystically intuit it, other Jedi do a lot of training and study. So you've got kind of both represented there. But psionic magic lets you, for example, use telepathy, telekinesis, hasten yourself, make you like double your speed, give you more action points, that kind of stuff. Like it manipulates what you're physically able to do by changing the state of your essence, turning your skin to iron, even like some weird things, some things you would expect from like psionics, even temporarily like stopping time and stuff on like the more powerful end of the spectrum. Psionic magic is also, because it comes directly from essence, it's also the only magic that is accessible to humanoids in the first super eon of Ansera. Ansera is the planet where like it's the official like planetary setting for MythCraft, so it's where you explore. It's where our campaign is set. Mm-hmm. The first super eon is like an ancient prehistoric kind of mashup of like the ancient Near East and some other like ancient cultures, and just like dinosaurs and titanic like Godzilla style monsters. Like it's got all of that, because of a lot of lore that I think would take too long for me to explain in detail right now. Psionic magic is the only one accessible to humanoids until we get to the second super eon, which is where like our podcast campaign is set, and that's where all 5 sources are available. I'll probably do another video at another point. It won't be part of our like tutorial series, but I'll talk through kind of the grand scale lore in more depth at a later point. The last source of magic is occult magic, and that out of the classes which we recorded previously, you can see videos where we go into in depth on, or sorry, not in depth, but we talk through each of the classes and just kind of what they're able to do.
Right.
The vessel and one of the witch options are the two that allow you direct access to occult magic, unless you just do it on your own without worrying about classes. But occult magic is like stealing from planar entities, usually from gods, but it could be from another powerful planar entity, maybe even like a lich or demigod, like someone at that kind of in between level. Stealing some of their power because they're so powerful that they're not going to notice if, if you steal $1 from a millionaire, they're probably not going to notice, right? So it's that kind of idea with occult. It depends on the millionaire, right?
Scrooge would notice.
Scrooge would notice, yeah. Which is part of the danger of occult magic. Like, again, because you're stealing from someone who uses divine or arcane or psionic or primal magic, you're not directly accessing arcane, so you're not risking burning yourself out, but you are risking getting caught red-handed using someone else's magic. So there's that like kind of arcane thievery dynamic going on there. So back to the warlock conversation, like if the way you imagine your warlock is your patron doesn't know that you're taking magic, then occult is probably the right one. If you're entering into like a formalized pact, then it's probably divine magic. So those are the 5 sources. Arcane, in like the kind of greater than less than dynamic, arcane supersedes divine and primal because it kind of created both of them. It is weaker than psionic and occult. Occult is able to steal from it. Psionic, a person's essence is able to overcome like the raw power of, like if you put essence and the fundamental wellspring at a head with one another, essence would win out, just because of like the time and change equation. Divine is stronger than psionic and primal. Divine obviously is like a lesser version of arcane, but it also synthesizes with essence. So in that way, it kind of gets the best of both worlds. Occult is, I mentioned, stronger than arcane. It's also stronger than divine because like a lot of religious cults corrupt and degrade what the original intent was. And so they're able to slowly deteriorate something over time. But psionic and primal are able to overcome occult either by just like outlasting it or by eventually purifying it in some way. And I think that's most of the connections. Primal is stronger than psionic. The like natural order, the plants, the earth will outlive any like mortal person. And I believe that explains every connection you'll need to know. I didn't go through every single one, but they should all be represented in there. Mal and Cody, if you were to be a caster, either through a class or just on your own, what source would speak to you directly, like as a person and as like as a player character? Like what would you mean if you were to be a caster?
That's a good question. Well, in real life, I consider myself something of a minor occultist. Nothing major, but dabble a little bit here or there.
Mm-hmm.
As a player, I usually lean towards arcane. I always play, if I'm going to be a magic user, I usually want the source. Like, give me access to the raw power. I don't care if I get burned. But like I said, in real life, I'm probably a little bit more of a occultist.
In real life,
Nice.
for me, I'd probably definitely be on the primal side of things. I have a lot of animals in my home. I'm just like, my everyday life is just heavily nature based. I don't do well with keeping my own house plants alive for some reason. So you win some, you lose some.
Yeah.
As a player, I feel like occult would be really fun to mess around with. Just that risk of like I'm being so sneaky and then I don't know if I'll get caught today.
Mhm. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for me to pick. I think as a real person, I'd probably be divine. World religions have always fascinated me. I am a practicing Christian, but beyond that, just like studying other like religious cultures and why people believe what they believe, I always find really like inspirational. From a player side, I bounce all over the place, but Hildegard in our podcast is um, actually a blend of psionic and probably also primal and occult. So you'll see like a
Yeah.
weird synthesis over the next few levels as she accesses all of that. I want to, for I guess the last portion of this, because we got through all the like lore and how they work with one another. I want to talk through the mechanics of casting magic as a player in your game. So, um, first, every source has spell points, and every source has spells, which you cast by spending spell points. So when you get access to magic, you start out with 10 spell points, and you get 5 more every time you take a level in a casting class or in magic talents. And each spell costs a certain amount of spell points. As long as you have enough spell points, then you can keep casting that same spell. Subtracting from your like reservoir of spell points each time, and then you gain back all of your spell points when you take a rest.
Okay.
Conjuring is the other mechanic that is stable across all 5 sources, and this is like for your more powerful spells that take a longer time to speak into existence. Um, Fireball is a good example. Fireball says Conjuring 1, and what that means is it takes you at least 1 full turn to cast Fireball. So it'll have a certain number of action points, and then it'll say like Conjuring 1, Conjuring 2, Conjuring 3. Once you've spent all of the action points that you need, then you're just waiting for that number of rounds to finish. So Fireball, can't remember exactly how many. Let's just find it. Okay, so Fireball costs a minimum of 4 action points. So let's say you spend all 4 action points in one turn. You still have to wait until the start of your next turn, and then immediately your Fireball goes off. Otherwise, if you don't have all 4 action points, let's say you spend 2 on one turn, then on the next turn you could spend the other 2, and then your Fireball would go off, as you've spent one turn already. Freeze down here, on the other hand, has Conjuring 2. So, and an action point cost of 12.
Sheesh.
So yeah, it takes a lot longer to cast it. But then it especially the more this this is a powerful spell. I don't remember exactly what this does. Looks like it just Elsas an area. You have like the ice spikes pop up, freeze people into place.
Nice. It's a bit of a higher level spell, kind of.
Yeah, for sure. It'd be like in like D&D 5th edition terms, it might be like 6th or 7th level, somewhere around that. But Conjuring 2, that means like you start casting and then you get to your next turn. That's been 1 round of Conjuring. So then you've got to wait until your next turn before you're able to complete it, even if you have all 12 action points.
Okay.
So that's spell points, that's action points, that's Conjuring. And you're going to see that over all 5 sources. There are cantrips, chants, and prayers across most of the sources. Cantrips are arcane abilities that cost no spell points, that just cost action points. Chants are primal and occult, but they otherwise do the same thing. They're just low-level magic that you can always do. And prayers are the equivalent in Divine. Psionic has something a little bit different. I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get back to Psionic. Mm-hmm. There are also rituals and invocations. Rituals are Rituals and invocations are basically the same thing, but they work a little bit differently. Invocations are a psionic and primal thing, and rituals are divine and occult. Divine and occult and psionic and primal, they don't share like a set of rituals or a set of invocations, but they both use the same mechanics depending on what source you're in. Um, Rituals you can cast a certain number of times, or you can cast once and it will tell you when you can like recast it. Usually you'll get it back when you recoup or when you take a rest, depending on how powerful it is.
Sure.
Invocations, on the other hand, you can just cast a blanket number of times based on how powerful you are in that source. So you could cast the same invocation twice, or you could cast two different invocations depending on your power level. And rituals and invocations, I mean, the names kind of imply this, but they're going to be the longer to cast spells, like usually at least 10 minutes or at least 30 minutes, sometimes as long as 8 hours to cast some of them. So definitely not the kind of thing that you would want to do while you're trying to engage in combat.
Sure.
And then the last one is spells. We talked about that already, that you spend spell points to cast spells. Before I go through the sources and talk about like each of the more source specific mechanics, are there particular spells or like magical effects that either of you really like from D&D or from other role-playing games or video games, or even just like media, like movies, books, whatever, that I'll see if there's like an equivalent as we're going through, or something that kind of resembles something you really like.
Sure. Before we go too far, I did have a question about Conjuring.
Oh, sure.
So let's say it's like Conjuring 3, 12 spell
Mhm.
points. I know it's probably not going to happen, but or 12 action points, I mean.
Yeah.
Let's say somehow you were able to do all the action point commitment like right away, but you still had to wait 3 turns. Can you do other stuff while you're conjuring?
While conjuring, you may not move or spend any AP or reactive AP on anything other than conjuring the spell in question. So you
I
are
see.
locked into that. There
So in such
are
a scenario, it's probably better off to position, move, do whatever it is you got to do first.
Yeah.
And then do you have to spend at least 1 AP to initiate the spell?
So you could start
Okay.
like at the very tail end of one of your turns.
That's probably what I'd do.
Yeah,
I'd
it's
probably like
usually what I would
run,
do.
hide, run behind a rock,
Yeah,
and then spend 1 AP to start casting my 3-turn conjuring spell.
right. There are talents. I actually can't remember if they made it into the core book, but if not, they'll make it into a future supplement that allow you to run around while you're conjuring.
That would be nice.
Yeah, like you can spend while conjuring, you can spend AP to move, and after meeting more prerequisites, there might be like after conjuring or while conjuring, you can still spend AP to do like a cantrip, chant, or prayer. Like
That would be really
give you,
impressive.
yeah, a little bit more versatility at the
It would
expense
make
of,
casting pretty strong, maybe, but I mean,
right.
you're limited by your spell points.
It's also like remember that each time you take a talent, that's in place of advancing your class. So
That's true.
there's that payoff as well.
Interesting. Okay. That
Yeah,
was just one thing that I was wondering how that would work.
right.
All right. I suppose in D&D, one of my favorite things is always illusion spells. But
Okay,
in Dungeons and Dragons, they don't seem particularly effective unless they're really high level.
right. Mal, do you have a go-to
Oh,
or a spell in like some media that you really enjoy?
yes, I've been thinking about a couple. I've been playing a lot of Baldur's Gate recently, and I've been really enjoying all the creative uses for Speak with Dead. In
Nice.
particular, is there something kind of similar to that?
We'll need to check both divine and occult. I know that there's a primal aspect, which is not part of the primal source of magic, that lets you communicate with dead creatures. Um, but that's more like doing kind of last funeral rites, figuring out what honors like their culture or whatever.
Oh,
Um,
that's cool.
yeah, and so like barbarians or berserkers and rangers gain access to that, or can gain access to that. But yeah, we'll check as we're going through, check the divine and occult source and see. Here's
And
a.
then,
Sorry, go ahead.
for just like normal D&D stuff, I also really like Misty Step and Dimension Door. Those kinds
Oh
of
yeah,
like quick getaway things.
hmm sure. Yeah, so
Dimension
we'll
Door has saved my butt.
lots of times. Yeah, it's a good one. Um, okay, I will highlight one that's kind of like spike growth because insanity damage. That one is always used to destroy everything.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, especially when you've got a telepath or a telekinetic who can just choose
Yeah,
great enemies.
one of my characters, insanity damage, is a push pull guy, and everyone always seems to just want to make it better for me. I always enjoy that. Yeah, sure, I'd love to push people into spikes. Yeah, sure, I'd love to
Mhm.
push people into the fire.
Yeah. um. Yeah. Okay. So sensory illusion. This is just a cantrip, so it's not very strong, but you can create like a sound or an odor or a smell or a visual illusion. Like you're able to mess with any of the senses. Um, not very powerful. Pretty easy to figure out, but just a little something you can do. I know. Let's see. In the arcane source, particularly, there's something called, here we go, an arcane ritual. This is kind of like the rituals that I talked about earlier. It's a little bit different because it follows different rules. Like it's still a spell. You can just get around spending spell points if you take extra time to cast it as a ritual.
Nice.
As opposed to, as we'll see in the divine and occult source, rituals are just like their own separate list of abilities. Let's jump down. I know arcane has one kind of like misty step or like a low level teleportation ability, or it. I guess I was wrong. I think it's occult warp step.
Swift teleport.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, thanks. Swift teleport. Um, yeah, very similar to Misty Step. It's just like a quick little hop for a low amount of spell points. What is nice is you can just increase the number of spell points to increase how far you're able to
That is
teleport.
nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is cool.
Yeah,
like
so I
that.
mean, what is that? Casted at 150 spell points to move like probably a couple miles. No, not quite. Probably about half a mile, I think, if I'm doing my estimating right. For reference, 150 spell points. If you focus spell casting and just focus on like gaining more spell points for your talents by being like a mage or a witch or someone else who gains those abilities, at level 30 you're going to have 150 spell points unless
Wow.
you start at level 1, first getting like access to magic through one of the sources and then going into a class. Then you'd have 155.
It'd be a lot, but that's all day, right? You can't like get those back on a catch your breath or a recoup.
I think there are definitely some abilities that let you get them back. I know Primal has a thing where you can like basically absorb sunlight to regain spell points, like photosynthesize.
Nice.
Yeah, so there are ways, but they're not going to be. It's not going to be like fully capped out.
I see.
It might be like if you're bloodied and you recoup, then you regain some of your hit points. It's something kind of like that for spell points.
Fair enough.
All right, we're in divine magic now. I'll be sure to check for like speak with the dead kind of stuff. Divine magic has liturgy and sacrament abilities. Some of the spells do, and a liturgy is a ritual that also has an action point cost and a spell point cost. So it has the option of being cast as a spell, but you could still just use it as a ritual instead. I'll find an example of one of those. Sacrament is a spell that has like a material component where if you like sacrifice it, then it boosts the power of the spell.
Makes sense.
Let's see, we're in rituals. Let's find a nice. Here's a liturgy, empathy, liturgy, APC, SPC. So you can cast this for 3 action points for 12 spell points. It still expends the use of the ritual, so you couldn't use it again until you catch your breath. But it lasts up to 8 hours or until you use it again. Yeah, for the duration or until you cast this ritual again. But it basically lets you take damage on behalf of someone else. Like you feel their pain, you literally magically empathize with them.
Okay.
Let's look for some kind of... I mean, create undead. That's not quite speaking with dead.
And that's considered divine.
It is. There's animate skeletons, I believe is the name of it. That's a cult. So there's definitely some
okay.
overlap in what the sources can do. It's again like imagine each of the 5 sources as like a Venn diagram circle. Like there will be parts where they bleed into each other a little bit.
For sure. Well, I mean, I guess it makes sense that the occult would borrow that power.
Right. There's resurrection. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's a speak with dead in divine, so we'll check primal, or we'll check occult, and if not that, then there's the like primal aspect ability. And if that's not in the core rulebook, I'll probably sneak that into Veil of the Eternal Night. So if you're watching this in January of 2024, it hasn't happened yet. If you're watching it after, then it has happened. Veil of the Eternal Night is our next Kickstarter, and it's going to be a massive gothic horror, vampire, grimdark campaign module going from 0 to hero all the way up to the top level in both MythCraft and in D&D. So lots of awesome, creepy, haunted stuff to happen there. So that spell would be perfect for that. This one's fun. Miracle lets you just rewrite the course of world events in a manner your deity would approve of. So why not?
I like that.
Yeah.
That's insane. It costs 150.
Well, my god gave me permission, so.
Right. Yeah,
That's like
it's
a
150,
kind of
so
thing,
it's
huh?
it's a one per day. Like you do it and it's done. And then I know our like high level world ending spells also have really harsh repercussions. You become shaken for the rest of your life and can never cast this spell again. So
Wow.
there's definitely interplay. Like wish can be fun, but we wanted to avoid wish just being happening really frequently. So
I agree with that. I mean, wish can be fun to mess around with a little bit, but every day,
right.
That's nuts.
Or like the cleric's divine intervention ability in 5th edition, just like once a week is kind of ridiculous. All right, let's see. Occult magic. Oh, we've got some new tags for occult magic. So you've got chants and rituals. As I mentioned earlier, rituals are going to work kind of the same as they do in divine. You've also got incantations, which are like kind of like concentration spells. They have like ongoing effects. You've got ritualize spells. So while divine spells might have liturgy that let you turn, or divine rituals might have liturgy that let you turn them into spells. Some of the occult spells have the ritualize tag that let you kind of go the opposite direction with it. And dark power here is like kind of the really fun highlight of occult. These are chants or rituals or spells that are a little bit more powerful, but have the potential to backfire. And in one of our unrecorded sessions, this actually happened to Tanner's occult character, who was trying to blind the mini boss that we were fighting, and triggered dark power, and it blinded him instead. So
Right.
Oh no.
yeah, there's that kind of risk reward with occult. Let's see. Yeah, their animate corpses is kind of the raise dead or create undead, but for occult.
I guess it makes sense though, because the way you described occult is, they borrow stuff from others. So probably a lot of these are somewhere else in a way.
Yeah, Dreamwalker is kind of like one of the psionic abilities you can get. If you're a vessel, which is a class, not part of the occult thing directly, but like as vessel, you gain access to occult. as Vessel, you also gain access to the Cleric's Divine Icon, so you're literally stealing from another class.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, thanks. Let's see. Regenerate, I think, is also in Divine or something like it is. Summon Fiend, Undo Curse. Yeah, it doesn't look like we've got like a ritual or a spell that does any like dead communing or like the other consideration there is because like as your essence diffuses, like speaking with someone who's already dead is going to become more and more difficult. But like some kind of again, read the terms and conditions, but some kind of communing with the afterlife, I think, is definitely something that should show up in Veil of the Eternal Night. And we'll come down here to the bottom of these spells. There's Warp Step. That's another. It's a little bit weaker than Swift Teleport. Yeah, but it's the same kind of concept. Let me just look at an example of Dark Power here. So this Silhouette spell has the Dark Power tag. When you finish conjuring the spell, roll a d20. If you roll a 5 or lower, then the spell's appearance-altering effects become permanent.
Great.
Yeah, so it looks like this just turns you or someone you touch just like completely like pitch black, like you're a silhouette. So it makes you a lot more stealthy and a lot more intimidating, but you don't necessarily want that to be a permanent effect. And there's a chance that it just latches on and doesn't let go.
Is there any sort of way to undo that ever, or is that just...
Yeah. When you cast this spell again, targeting a creature permanently affected, you can you can overcome Dark Power by like recasting it on the same person. Yeah.
Okay.
And then
is
otherwise,
there any way
like
to purposely fail?
that no, but great idea for like an occult talent is like intentionally feeling that. Yeah,
Just
that could
like
be really cool.
really hope you roll lower than 5.
Right. Yeah, or do like a Divine Portents thing and get a low roll and just save it for an occult spell.
There you go.
Yeah, there are ways around it for sure. I think there was one other thing I was going to say about occult magic. Can't remember. Something you said, Cody, I think triggered it, but it's gone now. I don't know. I'll mention it if it comes back to me. The Primal Source has a couple different delineating tags that don't mean anything on their own, the way they do with these other two sources we just looked at. Emotion, nature, and weather kind of encapsulate the three sides of like the Fae, kind of the whimsy nature or the like morose nature that you might see in the Everwilds. And then, of course, nature and weather are obviously pretty like intuitive with primal magic. Intrinsic and extrinsic also obviously affect you or affect the world around you. And again, those tags on their own don't mean anything when you're casting, but the ranger interfaces with them. I think certain oracle talents interface with them. Same with the witch probably. So there's different ways that you can like increase the power when you cast like a certain type of tag or decrease the spell point cost for certain spells. Yeah, and then these are going to be your typical like nature focused spells. You've got Fog Cloud, Ambrose's favorite, right?
Right.
I really like these primal invocations because I mean they're chunky. They've got like a lot of rules text, but you can conjure up a blizzard or just create an earthquake. These are significant like environment altering abilities. They usually are later in gameplay. Like this is Primal Tier 3, which you're not going to be able to access until you're at least like level 5 or 6. So it takes some time to get there.
I see.
Yeah. Let's see if there's a couple other.
Now with the tiers, does that have to be like your class level is 5 or 6, or just overall level?
It counts the number of so each source will reference like divine power or arcane power. That's the number of talents that you've taken from leveling up in that source or in a class that links to that source. So the tier system is used in Primal and Psionic, and that translates your power, your Primal power or your Psionic power into a tier. So it'll just be tier 1 through 6 instead of like, the Divine Source. If you put 20 talents into Cleric, then you're going to be Divine 20. So it's kind of a different tracking mechanism that achieves much of the same mechanical effect. Here's the spike growth kind of abilities. There's Wall of Briars, there's Tangle of Brambles. Both do much the same thing. They slow you down, they tear at you. Lastly, we've got the Psionic Source. And I mentioned cantrips, chants, and prayers, and how Psionic has something similar. So what that is your your manifestation and your aptitude. So when you take psionic magic, you choose an aptitude. You choose clear sentience, psychokinetics, metacreativity, telepathy, or psychometabolics, which is just a fun mouthful. And when you take a spell that has the manifestation tag and has your aptitude, then you can cast it for 0 spell points. So it's like a set of like cantrips customized based on what your aptitude is. So I'll find an example of those. Let's see, we'll get through the invocations. There's Dream Speak. That's kind of like the occult ritual we looked at earlier. Dream Walker, I think. Let's see.
Would psionic be a good place for Speak with Dead since you're communicating with their essence?
Yeah. Psionic has one. They're not dead, but it has Haunt. Not yet, right? It has Haunt, which lets you incept your way into someone else's dreams and just terrify them.
Oh, that's cool.
Ooh, that's cool.
Don't trust that with Hildegard. She will probably. I think she would mess people up with that. It's like my trauma is your trauma. Here's an example of a manifestation: create ammunition or create weapon. These are both meta creativity. So if that's your aptitude, then you can cast these spells for 0 spell points. Whereas if your aptitude is like clear sentience, then these would still cost their normal number of spell points. But something like, I believe, telepathic anchor, that might be the wrong one. That might be an invocation. But something that gives you more awareness of, like, supernatural awareness of where you are in relation to the world around you. That might cost 0 spell points for a clear sentient. Well, that's pretty much it. Those are the 5 sources of magic, how they work with one another, how they work kind of on their own in their own terms, the lore behind them. Thank you so much for listening. Mal and Cody, thank you for joining me for this video. The next one is going to be a tutorial of combat. So we've got kind of all of this groundwork. We're going to jump in and see how some of it works. So be sure to tune in for that. We will see you next time.
All right. Yep. See you later.